Welcome to Tech Talk Nation, talking about the latest tech, industry news, and hot topics. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Visit our website at techtalknation.com.
Good evening and welcome to Tech Talk Nation. I'm your host, Matt Fitzgerald, and we have a show for you tonight. It has been a very big week in tech, from Apple to Google having two wonderful events, their own custom silicone, some new Macs, and some new phones. So we have a lot to cover tonight, and without further ado, I am joined once again by my co-hosts, Matt Grislow and Ryan Eastman, and we're going to go through all of it for you today. So, yes, that's kind of where we're at right now. It's been a busy couple of days here. That is for sure. Right, guys? How are you doing?
I'm a furniture owner now. I have a couch.
That's a plus.
Congratulations.
My first piece of big furniture I purchased as a
There you
big
go.
boy adult with. Yeah, so
Very nice, very
I think
nice.
it's good. And a lot of tech news.
A lot of
So,
tech
happy about
news,
that.
definitely.
Tons.
Well, before we go into that, just make sure to follow us on social media. We're going to be posting more about stuff like that, and we're going to let you know when we're going to be having shows and covering stuff. So, going to be a lot of fun. And today's show, we got something special for you. I let Grislow take the reins on the Apple event here, and he's going to be providing a little bit of a summary, and then we're going to go into a little bit of our thoughts and our takes on all of Apple's news. So, without further ado, Mr. Grislow, take us away.
Thanks, Fitz. So Apple or Google has been known to have been having the Pixel event this week for a few weeks. All of a sudden last week, in the middle of nowhere, I think it was like last Wednesday or Thursday night, they dropped an invite for a event on Monday, the day before Google's event. Most definitely and obviously for non-phone things, but nonetheless, they very clearly planned it the day before that Google event. And so they announced some new products and some new services, and I just want to quickly go over them. There wasn't a lot, but what was there was pretty jam-packed. It was a 53-minute keynote, and they broke down a few of their new products. So new HomePod minis, nothing new about them except for colors. There's like a blue, gold, and like a dust or a rust color. That's it. New AirPods, a new AirPods main sort of mainline product. Their base model version. This is version 3. Notable upgrades, a new design. They have more of the plastic look of the. Well, I can't show you them because I have them on, but more of the AirPod Pros, just minus the silicone tip. They have most of the other features that the Pros have, just they don't have the noise canceling modes. One of the big notable changes, though, in this base model AirPod that actually do make it a bit better than the Pros is the Pros have a 4.5 hour battery life on their own. These new ones have a 6 hour battery life. Combined with the case, the AirPod Pros get up to 24 hours. With the case, the AirPod 3s get 30 hours of battery life. So that's a big improvement over not just the old AirPods that are, I think actually these, but also over the standard Pros. I think that's about it. They also charge with MagSafe. They also then backtracked and said that the AirPod Pros work with MagSafe, so that's good to know. And that's about it for the AirPods 3s. Again, just about the same as the Pros, except no noise canceling features and better battery life, which is interesting. Now came the big portion of the event, the Macs. Apple decided to unveil 2 new Macs, in addition to 2 brand new chips. They touted the new M1 chip, I believe, 1.5 to 2 years ago, and now they unveiled sort of improvements on that chip, the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. So it has that right there. I've got some of the specs here, some of the big points. I'll go over the Pro first and then the Max. On the Pro, it's got a 10-core CPU with 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. It has a 16-core GPU. And these are all, I guess, the max specs of the Pro. 16-core neural engine with a 200 gigabit per second memory bandwidth, which is pretty good. Things it does video encoding and decoding, as well as ProRes functionality, as well as ProRes RAW. Now on the side of the M1 Max chip, you have a 10-core CPU with 8 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores, up to 32 core GPU, 16-core neural engine, and 400 gigabit per second memory bandwidth. That's pretty dang good. And then they talk about this unified memory. They've sort of reworked their memory, and so now on the Max you can get up to 64 gigabytes, and on the Pro you can get 32 gigabytes. Specifically for the Pros now, they have a 14 and 16-inch model. You can make or configure them with either of the chips. They start pretty expensive now. The 14-inch starts at $19.99, and the 16-inch starts at $24.99. So this is a computer for pros. But I will say this computer is built for pros. Apple finally stepped up to the plate, and they did a lot of things that are going to make a lot of consumers happy. They got rid of the touch bar. No more touch bar. They brought back function keys. They added back MagSafe, an interesting design decision, and not the MagSafe that they recently unveiled with their phones, but the previous generation MagSafe charging technology that was used on the old MacBooks. They also brought back ports. We have ports and ports galore. There are 3 Thunderbolt 4 USB-C ports, an HDMI port, an SD card slot port, as well as your 3.5 millimeter jack port, and I believe there's also 2 more USB-C ports with Thunderbolt 4, or I guess it's 3. So 2 on one side, 1 on the other. So we're bringing back ports. It also has, as you can see, a new kind of design. We were talking in the pre-show about this. Fitz and I were. It's interesting to see the design language shift back. The last sort of push in design language is more towards this flat, very obelisk type design, and this new design harkens back to an older one we've seen in the previous MacBooks, albeit in a more plastic iteration. But you have that again, that curved beveled edge. Probably some different design changes on the back of the display. Speaking of the display, they actually have improved it. They included mini LED technology. Let me get my notes. Mini LED technology with essentially the same technology they have in their liquid retina XDR displays that they sell for the Macs. They are up to 1,000 nits in brightness, and in full screen brightness, and 1,600 nits peak brightness. And then they have all the other cool things that a lot of these computers have: wide color P3 gamut, True Tone tech. They do have promotions. So promotions now on the Mac, you can go from, I believe it was it 1 to 120 or 10 to 120 hertz?
10 to 120.
Either way. Okay. Well, I know Google was 10 to 120, and I want to make sure that it is the same for Apple.
I believe so. It's either 10 or 20.
Okay. Some other notable things that they've changed. They've gotten rid of the bezels and the forehead, and now the dreaded notch has been brought to the MacBooks. I don't really love it, but that's my personal opinion. They've shrunk the bezels ever so slightly on the sides, and they have these new rubber feet. As for the battery life on the 16-inch, you're going to get up to 21 hours and up to 17 hours on the 14-inch. Am I missing anything? Storage size is up to 8 terabytes for both models, starting at 512 gigabytes. That's a pretty big SSD. And they have upgraded the camera to 1080p technology, which was they really should have.
About 4 to 5 generations overdue.
720p was aging a little poorly. finally, some final things. They've upgraded the audio. I believe it's 2 tweeters and 4 subs. They make a big deal of it. I find it interesting considering they make accommodations for all kinds of other bigger headphones, and they made a big deal of actually the
impedance.
Yes, thank you. The impedance of the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack to accommodate some of these bigger drivers and bigger headphones, more pro setups. But again, I find it interesting that they had improved the other audio so much more. Keyboard wise, again, they got rid of the function, or they brought back the function keys, getting rid of that touch bar. They blacked out between the keys, which is a new interesting design choice. And now there's Touch ID in that top function row of keys. Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5, and all those ports. Yeah, that's all I got. The 16-inch charges up to, looks like 140 watts and up to 96 on the 14-inch, depending on how you configure it. It was an interesting event. I don't think anyone was anticipating it being so short. I guess, and I suppose we weren't anticipating a certain product other than maybe the AirPods 3. I know I was looking forward to a new Mac Mini, as well as a new Mac Mini, possibly a new Mac Pros, or the ability to configure Mac Pros with the new chips, and I hope you can. But gentlemen, what did we think? I know we were live chatting, or not live chatting, but talking amongst ourselves during the event, and there were some interesting things about these new chips. I think that's probably the biggest focus.
Do we want to just double back and cover those first 2 or 3 things real quick, and then get to the meat and potatoes?
Sure.
Let's do that.
Go ahead.
Orion?
So what is it? HomePods, AirPods.
HomePods.
Oh, no. I just wanted to deal with those first, and then we can just focus.
Yes.
HomePods and AirPods. I don't know. Siri in general has not been the most useful assistant, so HomePod doesn't seem like it has a great home to me, ironically. AirPods, it's good to have an upgrade. I'm not surprised the battery life's longer. They don't have to deal with noise cancellation, consumes less battery. But it's good to upgrade it. They were touting some kind of adaptive EQ thing, but that's been around for a very long time, so it's just, I guess, their implementation of it.
For sure.
It just seems like a normal progression forward. And they updated the design language to look like the pros.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to touch on with the HomePods, at least for me, it just seems like all they did here is just make some new colors. I didn't really see anything that really stuck out to me as this is novel or interesting or anything. You're just watching a commercial for X thing in new color. And I mean, you could always change the color of something like that if you're ambitious and fearless enough.
Patient.
Yes, that too. But yeah, it's interesting. Just more of Apple's design language being forced on everybody, in my opinion. But yeah, it's interesting to see. The AirPods seem cool. They are pricier than I thought they would be, though.
Are they up the price?
They are $179.
Yeah.
They did raise the price of those from what they had previously priced the AirPod 2s at.
Right, and that's where I was kind of like, that's a little interesting to see. I could see it with the features that they've added and the design language that's changed. I just feel like that's a little hefty of a price to pay for those. So that's just me.
I mean, it's a $20 difference. I believe it was. But I agree with you. In my mind, this is a natural progression of the technology and of the product. And so I don't think it really warrants that much of a price increase. The other thing that surprised me was they're still selling the AirPod 2s, the second generation AirPods, which is really interesting considering they have those. They have their updated versions. They have the Pros, and they're also trying to sell the AirPods Max. Not that the lowest end AirPods is going to cannibalize the sales of the AirPods Max. Just the fact that they're selling the predecessor and the upgraded newest version at the same time. I do find it interesting. Not just that, but also it's now a was it a 80, less than 80, $70 difference in those Pros versus the AirPods Max. So they really have, even in the price, said, yeah, these are worth it so much more that they're so much closer to the AirPods Pros. Speaking from someone who actually does have AirPods Max, I'm sorry, AirPods Pros and the standard AirPods, these are so much more comfortable, these Pros. I don't know if it's my ears or whatever, but I definitely got some weird wear on my own inside of my ears from the speaker grills of the AirPods second generation. I think this design is much better, even with the ear tip removed from the equation, because I think it is part of the allure of the Pros. It's still a really great design, and so I'm glad that they've implemented that into these new Pros. As far as the HomePods go, I don't believe they were trying to introduce anything new, really just the colors. I believe all those features too have been or had been features they announced at WWDC as features that would be included in the newest software updates for their technology and their products. So I'm not really surprised, and I can't really imagine myself getting one of those crazy colors unless maybe if I do for my living room, which I'm kind of going with like a blue accent color kind of palette. So maybe,
Right.
but I don't really know. That's the only place I can
Exactly.
see it.
And honestly,
And
that's all I see from that entire
yeah,
section. But the one thing we did see that I know that we all really, really want to talk about is the new MacBook Pros. Um,
Yes.
so I don't know where to start with this one. Um, why don't we go with
you're
our
very qualified, by the way, probably to talk about this because you do have a M1 MacBook.
correct? Yes, I do have an M1 MacBook. It is right there. Oh, there it is, right there. Um, but yeah, it's I can go on and on about this. I'll kind of give my quick overview and the good, the bad, and the ugly about this, in my opinion. And then we can open it up. In my opinion, the good. I really, really, really like that they added ports back. I think that is great. I think that is
Hold
wonderful.
on.
Wait.
No, no. Okay, go.
Okay. Um, I like that they put an SD card reader in. That is, in my opinion, the biggest thing that they've done for
Yeah.
that laptop is put an SD card reader. Okay, Ryan. Yes.
Johnny giveth, Johnny taketh away. Uh, let's not forget that they took that away in the first place. They had those, and they got rid of it.
Yes.
I don't want to
You're
get
right.
I don't want to get carried away with being happy. They reversed a bad decision, which is good,
Well,
but they
I
made a
think
bad decision in the first place.
right, but I think the bigger point though, and in the trend that is just further progressing and that we've kind of explained and laid out in the show and that I've
Yeah,
mentioned a few
sure.
times, they're really considering user feedback now.
Yeah, they are
They
starting.
they really are showing they no longer care about how good it looks, how sleek it is, how thin it is. It's now about the user experience and what the users are really looking for.
I think part of this is a departure from Johnny Ives. I think Johnny Ives had a very singular vision for what he wanted everything to look like. He was their chief designer,
Mhm.
and he was really about pushing things forward at any cost, even like to make the products less useful and less convenient. And I think with his departure, they've kind of stepped it back a little and said, okay, wait a minute. SD card slots are really useful to a lot of people. HDMI ports are really useful to a lot of people. So I think that him leaving may have opened the door for them to maybe reverse some of those I don't
Design
know,
decisions.
counterintuitive decisions.
I could see it.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
But I mean, still, this is only on their pro version, right? Their
Correct.
normal version is still
Hmm.
just USB ports and a 3.5 millimeter jack.
Yep, that's it. That's all you got.
So
Even
we'll see
even
if
the
they,
earlier generation MacBook Pro is still that same thing.
yeah, we'll
So,
see if they carry that
Well,
back with their next release of M1 MacBooks.
I
right.
think an important thing though, I think an important thing to keep in mind though is this is the MacBook Pro. It
Sure.
has pro it has pro features. It has pro chips. And so naturally it should have all the ports that pros need. I actually think a really interesting thing is that they took away the SD card, and they keep selling. Not only have they continued to sell the MacBook as this really great video editing photo machine, but they've also pushed that even further with these new chips. And so it really is interesting that they decided now, as opposed to maybe even a year or two ago with the M1 Max, to bring back these ports that pro users use, especially people that record video that they're editing on their SD cards that they can simply interface with the machine.
Here's the rub, though, right? So my own father is as far from a pro as there is. He's not great with technology, to be honest. He knows enough to be able to work well. But just looking at the new Macs, he's still using one from like, I can't even remember what year, because he doesn't want to get one that doesn't have an HDMI port, doesn't have an SD card for like some of just the random stuff he needs it for.
Right.
I think a lot of just normal users want those ports too.
Yeah.
All the other stuff, that really is pro targeted, like especially that better headphone impedance rating. That's a 100% pro targeted feature.
Oh yeah,
Because like that enables them to drive headphones like the ones I'm wearing pretty easily. Because these are, I can't remember what impedance, but they're in the lower end of like higher higher impedance headphones. The lower end of higher impedance. Sure.
There you go. Let's think about that a little bit too. Could this also, with them bringing these ports back that people want, could this also be Apple's way of being like, well, you could get the last generation MacBook Pro, or you could get the new one with all of this
I
stuff
hope
on it,
not.
like kind of upselling. Do you know what I mean? Like
I hope
upselling
not.
somebody into a better model than they really
I
need.
thought, because I think we all kind of agree on the fact that this is more for a professional user.
Correct.
Right?
yes,
It starts at 2K. It starts there, and that's a not cheap price tag.
yeah.
So like that's
Yeah.
definitely a pro user thing, and they extended out the silicon to back that up heavily.
Right.
So I don't want them to try and upsell people for ports, because you shouldn't be paying an extra grand to get the ports you want. They should, and hopefully this is what they do when they re-release their MacBooks with, I don't know, whatever they're gonna update the M1 with, or if they just update the MacBooks. I just want them to release it then with those same port changes made back.
Right.
I think they'll probably pull off some of those extra USB-C ports, because I think those,
Sure,
and specifically
that's fine.
Thunderbolt ports, are ones that pro users would use. I can understand SD card and an HDMI
Yeah,
port being a fairly important thing for a standard consumer, but I think maybe those Thunderbolt, because you can include those in a standard computer. Not that you can't. It just wouldn't make sense to have all those ports on the less
yeah.
expensive
I
computer.
don't know if Joe Schmo needs 3 Thunderbolts.
Yeah.
Right.
And to that end though, like is a standard, just like everyday Joe Schmo, really trying to push for Thunderbolt 4, They just
Probably
want a
not
simple
that either.
HDMI
No.
connection.
Yeah, no. That's all I'm saying is I think like a normal person just wants some of those, like the ports that they added back in is what I'm talking about. Like just an SD card
Mhm.
slot and an HDMI. I think a lot of people would benefit just from having those back on like your normal MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
Right.
I can understand that.
Definitely. The next thing that I want to talk about,
Silicon.
yes, is Apple's M1 Pro and M1 Max. Two, in my opinion, best things to come out of that event. I believe
Oh yeah.
that these two processors are awesome. Like I want to see the benchmarks, but from everything that they've showed, I am blown away by the performance that they showed. Granted, it was their lab environment. Granted, of course, they're going to show only the things that make them look good. But from my experience, even with the normal M1, I can believe that that value hands down, just based on what I've used with an M1, what I've done with it. Um, a couple big things that really stood out to me is the support for multiple displays. That was something that was missing very badly in the M1. Like I could only have one external display, and I had to get a adapter for another one. So that's how I was able to get two. With this, it natively supports, I think, up to four um, displays. So that is a huge game changer and something that really is needed, in my opinion, in a pro market. Like, show me a developer that only codes on one screen. Show me a movie editor that only edits on one screen. Stuff like that. So it's
You're gonna find very few of those.
Yeah,
exactly
they exist, but I think they'd rather have more. They just can't at the moment.
right.
Sure. My question is that so like when I want to use my computer, I dock it, right? And I have and I'm able to do that. Do you think that is it really just that port is just so powerful, or is it because of the just increase in unified RAM or
So
the unified RAM?
so yes and no. In the way that the actual video is rendered on your screen is that signal comes from the processor, goes to the GPU. The GPU has to figure out, okay, this color goes here, this color goes here, times however big your screen is. And from there, we then have to pump that out to whatever port that you're using with enough bandwidth to be able to do that. The way M1 did that is I have it connected to a dock. It's pumping everything out through Thunderbolt to the dock. The dock's taking a little bit of the rendering power off of the M1. And then for my other screen, I have a literal display adapter. It has a USB 3, normal USB 3A connector, and then a display port out that goes to
Hmm.
this monitor. And yeah, that's taking all of the load off of the processor. The processor is just saying, "Hey, I need this," and then the actual unit itself renders the individual pixels. With the M1 Pro and the M1 Wax, it's actually bringing all of that into the single processor, and you could just connect up a standard Thunderbolt display, and you're good, which I find very good. I'm super
Hmm.
happy about that. Another thing that I want to touch on with that is you mentioned unified memory. I find that entire architecture incredibly interesting, and I want to get your
Oh
opinion on
yeah.
this, Ryan. I like the
Hmm.
fact that you can share memory between the GPU and the CPU. I just don't want that to become something where your GPU all of a sudden is eating up 30 of your 32 gigs of RAM because you're being a dumbus when you're programming or something like that. So I don't know. What's
Yeah,
your
I don't know.
thoughts?
I mean, as far as that little bit goes at the end, thankfully, tasks tend to not do both unless it's gaming, in which case it will eat up both. But if you're gaming on a Mac, you're a fool. Just outright, because they're just not meant for that. They don't support developers at all for anything that isn't like, I don't know, usable on both their iPad and their Macs, or
Right.
their iPads and their Macs. They don't support like your usual like PC games and all that typically. But it's an interesting architecture. It's an interesting step forward. Uh, I have trouble with every time I watch one of the press conferences. I can't make heads or tails of what their charts are actually measuring and what claims are actually making here, because I mean it is vague. Safe assumption is it's a lot faster and it's a lot better at. I'm gonna guess a lot better at multi-core performance. Uh, I can't remember off the top of my head how many cores are in the M1 and if they up the count for the new ones.
I believe 8. 8 or 10.
8. Okay.
Let me
Yeah.
look it up.
I
There's
assume
10
it's
in the new
multi-core.
chips.
It's possible too that these just have a higher TDP as well, and they're going to up single core
8.
performance.
It's 8.
Yeah, I think they're. I mean, these do have a higher TDP, so they might have upped single core performance as well, and that might be giving just an all-around big boost to everything. It's hard to understand what they're trying to measure here and there, and they don't give numbers because I guess they don't want you to compare it to like x86 architecture because it's just not the same. Like it's just a fundamentally different architecture. So I'm assuming they try to make as little like cross comparisons as possible. As far as like, so I mean, that being the case, I think the thing to compare is probably use cases and what it's going to get used for. I'm slightly struggling with like the perfect use case for this. Like a purely Final Cut editor and like a purely like Photoshop editor, I see like using this. Like special effects people and all that. I'm assuming you need more power for that. Because
Well,
like
at least
that's
the final render, definitely
yeah.
100%. Like your final render, you gotta throw the freaking kitchen sink at it.
Yeah, and that's what you get like workstation GPUs and like that caliber of GPU.
Right.
So I don't know if you can like do all the pre stuff on the laptop and ship it off to a render farm to work for you. It's not my workflow. It's not what I'm specialized in. Uh, I see some of the uses for it. I don't know what people are willing to pay for it, and I don't know like what value that adds to people. It might be that there's a pretty wide market of pros that this applies perfectly to, and I'm just not in that area.
Yeah. In my opinion,
It's
photos. I think this is basically like this is the perfect laptop if you're a wedding photographer or you're a wedding videographer, in my opinion. Like you're on site, you're editing a video or something like that, you just got to chunk it out, or you're doing some sort of live thing at an event. Like I think this is great for you, but like you said, that we're struggling for the use case that would be specifically for this laptop in the
audio
professionals.
actually as well.
Ooh, good point. Yeah,
I could see a lot of good uses for audio for it as well.
like recording and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, are you making the argument that this is actually not as powerful as
No,
you want it to be, or that it should
I'm
be?
saying I don't know where its niche is, but that might just be like my ignorance of like these fields that exist. Because like it's not a flat out workstation. Clearly, it's still a laptop. I'm not sure where its niche is, and its niche might be really wide, and I'm just not a video editor, so I don't know like 50 other editors who maybe love this and want this. And it might be the case there's this massive clamoring for this. I don't know. It's the problem.
I
Well,
mean,
That's what I'm kind of saying. I'm
I think
wondering
it
where
kind
its
of.
niche is and who wants it.
I mean, I think it's in the name, pro users. I mean, maybe that's too simplistic,
That's
but
generic.
I think that pretty encapsulates a lot of these people. People who are really into heavy video editing, heavy photo editing. They need to render a lot of crazy stuff. They need some pretty incredible performance on a laptop.
That's the bit that gets me is the on the laptop.
Well, you can't. And this is why I wish they would have also mentioned, and why I wish I would have looked on whether or not they've now included these new chips in the configurations for the Mac, the Mac Pro,
iMac?
the Mac Pro. I think this could really suit that and take it to a different level. I'm not sure why they didn't do that. In that, I think, I mean, yes, that's even more niche, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think this is a good one audience. We're just not creatives. I think this is meant for
Yeah,
creatives.
I'm
It's meant
saying
for
there might
people.
be. My point is I'm not
I think you're
sure.
underestimating this. I don't think that niche is the right word. I really don't think it's a niche. Because if it's a niche, I think you're really tailoring maybe or talking more about the Mac Pro. The MacBook Pro, I
No,
think you're
I just
talking
mean
about
where
a
it fits inside of the
lot of
market.
people.
I'm using as like a generic term like they use in like the environment, like an animal fills a certain niche in like a food chain. That's how I'm using
Right,
it.
but
Like
niche
I
is
just mean
supposed to be very specific. I think it's what really is a better term is just the category of people or the demographic,
that is
because
what niche
niche
means.
implies there's a very slim amount or a small group of people who this really applies to.
No.
And I
So
don't think that this is a very niche product. I think the Mac
pigeon
Pro is a niche product.
I'm
I don't think the MacBook
listen,
Pro
I will
is.
change the
Maybe this
words I'm
iteration
using.
is.
I will
I
change
don't.
the words I'm using, but pigeons have a niche in the environment and pigeons are very widespread. The group of people who I don't know what the clamoring is, I don't know like the point that I'm making is that I don't know, right?
For
That
sure.
kind of is the point I'm making. Like, I'd have to talk to a bunch of video editors and all that and see who wants to use it and who doesn't. Apple probably has a better handle on that than I do, to be honest.
Right.
I'm curious, like, I'm kind of just wondering, like, what the adoption rate, kind of all that's going to end up looking like. That's kind of what I'm driving at. Because I don't know is fundamentally the problem.
And I think those numbers are going to be interesting for any
Yeah.
product, considering right now, just with all the product and material shortages.
Right.
And to be fair, I don't even know how this is going to affect these new chips. I don't know if it affects new chips as much as like older, more established, already produced and design chips. But very interesting to have two different chips in the middle of a
Yeah.
chip shortage.
I think a lot of the contracts get worked out 3 or so years beforehand. So we might not see like a lot of the big renegotiation prices for a while.
Right.
I mean, I feel like let's hope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
As far as the chip goes, it's cool. They upgraded it. It does more. I'm interested to see what like actual performance is going to look like as opposed to their graphs, because I've never been able to pull meaningful data from the graphs. It looks interesting. I'm salty at not what was shown, at what wasn't shown, which, as you were kind of alluding to, I don't know if you were talking about the cheese grater Mac Pro or not, but the desktop, I want to see a
Yes.
desktop grade M1.
Yes.
That's what that is.
I don't think I've seen a desktop class ARM processor.
Right.
Well, and that's why I kind of opened this with I'm
Yeah.
really disappointed they didn't unveil a brand new, even Mac Mini. I think that would have been great. If that would have been, and they haven't done this in a
Oh, if you
while.
put this in a
If that
Mac
would have been
Mini.
a one more thing, if that would have been it, that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
Yes.
I
I
think it was a
completely
missed
agree.
opportunity.
Mhm.
I really want to know what like ARM architecture can do when you're pumping it full of like 60 watts, 80 watts. I want to know what that chip looks like.
Well,
Because
actually,
I don't know if I've seen it short of, and I don't want to accidentally institute a transition here. I know Google has probably server class Tensor chips.
so does AMD actually.
Are they ARM based?
Hmm. The Ampere.
I thought AMD was
Ampere?
all x86
Ampere?
based.
No, they have
Ampere?
some, or maybe that's the name brand. I think that may be the name brand. The Ampere.
Ampere is one of their GPU classes, I think.
Before we go off on a tangent and
No, I didn't
transition
want to go
here,
too far
No,
off.
I do just want to say while we were on the topic of Mac Minis, the last time it was updated was last year. So it seems like they're on sort of a 2-year refresh cycle. So that's understandable. But again, to your point about a desktop class machine with the performance of these two chips, and them touting the performance of these chips, that leads me to believe one of two things. One, they were just going with the next machines that needed to be upgraded, and in turn, they wanted to produce some new chips for it. Or two, they very explicitly created these chips for these machines, knowing full well that they were going to come out, and this is all speculation, with what would be the predecessor or successor, rather, to all three of these chips in what could be, I suppose, named the M2. That I don't know how far in development is currently, especially already unveiling a chip like this. What is it, a year or two after the M1 was unveiled? I'm not sure what the turnaround is, but my best guess as to why they wouldn't unveil any new desktop class machines is because they do want to reserve the next greatest thing for it, and they think that whatever they're working on or planning on working on really is going to take those machines to the next level.
right.
I mean, I can throw out a wild theory as well.
As long as we're theory crafting.
Yeah, as long as we're throwing out what, yeah. Well, I'm just throwing out a wild one now. I don't know. Maybe they don't feel that they can deliver a workstation grade GPU to pair with their desktop class CPU, right?
I could see it.
It could be that that's the case as well, because it's pretty clear that it's a very well designed chip, that they did an excellent job on it. but it could be that maybe they're not as confident with their GPU architecture
Right.
to like
That's interesting.
adjust to a workstation class.
Right. Or
And
they're
then maybe
they're
they might also be looking at the market right now and saying, all right, AMD doesn't have a great workstation class thing to pair with this either. And we don't want to work with NVIDIA because NVIDIA is all proprietary.
And
Mhm.
Ryan, you bring up a really good point here too, because let's think about the way that a processor itself is designed. A processor allows for a certain amount of PCIe channels, a certain amount of bandwidth that can come out of the machine or the processor going to a specific purpose.
Mhm.
If you have some sort of emulator that would emulate an x86 architecture on top of that bandwidth that would go to say a normal graphics card that you would throw in there, like let's say a 3090 or some sort of Tesla or some sort of Quadro or something like that, you're going to degrade the performance substantially, as well as just make it inefficient everywhere, not even just in the processor side of things, but the GPU side of things, because of that middle bridge there where you're not getting the
Yeah.
peak data out that you can get to that hardware. So I
Yeah. And
I
their
think
mobile
your point's
GPUs
pretty
are fine.
valid.
Their mobile GPUs are fine. They're
Right,
good.
right.
I'm just wondering if maybe they're not like confident to step up and try and scale that to workstation grade.
Not just yet, at least. I
Yeah, and
would
maybe
definitely see
and that
them.
might be something they're working on and taking their time with.
Right. I'd rather see them take their time with that and do it
That
right.
being said, I wouldn't mind watching one of these big chips in like say an iMac or something.
Right. Yeah.
And or a Mac Mini, like you suggested. Like those would both be great things to include in those.
Right.
I mean, they're already selling the Mac Mini with the M1. To me, it stands to reason that it would make sense to add another configuration in there, which doesn't
Or two.
look like you can currently
Right.
for an M1 Max or M1 Pro.
Right.
Maybe
Well,
in spring.
So they must be really reserving it for that Mac Pro.
definitely. Definitely.
Maybe it's a spring release, who knows?
Who knows? Um, so is there anything else that we want to talk about on this device itself before we head over to Google's side of things?
I think I'm pretty
Just
All
good
right.
with Apple.
One
cool,
closing point.
interesting. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. One closing thing I want to talk about.
Oh
Why?
yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about the notch.
Why?
Oh,
Oh,
forget about no. I mentioned it. We didn't even talk about this.
we didn't
Okay, yeah,
discuss the
we can't go
notch.
on without
We have
talking
to talk
about
about the
this.
notch.
Yes.
Oh boy, I shoot. Oh man, where do I start?
I can
am one of
start
the
you
biggest.
off.
I am one of the biggest advocates of shrinking bezels. I am. I love it. I love the idea of it. I love almost every implementation of it except for the notch. I thought we were getting away from the notch. I thought we were shrinking the notch. It doesn't seem like we are. And the funny thing is, they are not even using Face ID in these new Macs. They're not even using Face ID in these new MacBooks. They're not.
Right.
Yep.
All they did was upgrade the camera, and that necessitates a notch that is quite literally the width of this pen cap. Where's my camera? The width of this pen cap and the height. It's just way too big. Proportionally, does not make any sense. It is a huge, not just is it a huge eyesore, but from a design perspective, it does not make much sense at all. It might be minimal to most. That is just the biggest eyesore to me. There are plenty of other companies that have fixed this problem by essentially taking the notch and making it a portion of the display and moving it above the display. So yes, it is sort of like an inverse notch, but it doesn't take away the integrity of the main display.
Right.
I hate it. TLDR.
Yeah.
Why did you do this, Apple? I actually really don't like the design of this MacBook Pro. Just making that very clear. I like the blacked out keys and the keyboard. That's about it. They went back in their design language. That's all I'm saying.
Just to put it into perspective too, I pulled up a picture here of one of the MacBooks from like 2005, and you're right. I mean, granted, it's
Yep.
a lot thinner per se with the new Macs, but you have that square shape. You have the feet. You have stuff like that. And also, why the heck are these going for $200 still? But anyway,
Uh,
I
um,
think if you look at it in
I
person, it
would
might
actually.
be
I want to
nicer.
see how. Yeah, I want to see the thickness comparison because I think it could be comparable. Maybe not
No,
1 to 1, not 1 to 1.
not even
It's thick
close.
though. They're thick.
it's
No,
thick, but it's
I
it's
don't think. I
definitely
think
not.
you're really
Well,
underestimating
I
how
mean,
thick
hold
those
on.
whole
I
droids
I
are.
have the I have the physical uh specs here.
I know, but
It's
I'm just telling you
it's
though, you're really underestimating because those things had full CD slots. They had full USB ports. They
Full
had
hard
like some
drives.
other tall ports. Yeah,
that's fair, but I mean,
it's
still,
going to be
I
significantly thin.
so this is kind of the crux of the Apple debate, and it has been for a long time. We've already discussed this, but the the argument or the sort of going between making something very thin, very sleek, and just really good looking versus making something very functional and very useful. Um, Apple decided to go back the route of making things that are very useful and have a good purpose and serve many functions. I think I went back in the design language, and I personally don't love that decision, but I understand it is for the betterment of the MacBook Pros, and it makes sense. I just will fight it tooth and nail just because
I
those things look like big chonkers, and they look like the
I
ones
don't
from
think so at all.
literally 15 years ago, except they're not plastic.
I do not think so at all. I think it looks very nice, except for that notch. I hate that to the death.
For sure.
That's just the cherry on top of this just like
That's the
garbage
only thing I
design.
see wrong with it. Other than that, I see like a very just competent, like normal, good-looking laptop.
Yeah, and my takeaway from this entire event is great design, great step in the right direction in well, great design of the
Port-wise.
internals of the machine, the purpose of it, great
Mhm.
features. Like I know they said you could emulate iOS apps finally. That was a big thing.
Wait, that wasn't already there?
No,
I believe that was something they had already mentioned
I think they had
in
started that.
WWDC.
okay, maybe I
I
missed
don't know.
that, but anyway, their design language was good. Their um, the internals could kick behind, and I just think the price is a little high, in my opinion. But that's my takeaways. If I were to rate this event A through F, I would honestly give them an A, and that says a lot from me. So
B, I want a desktop.
Honestly, just because of everything that they announced, and in stark contrast to my rating of the other Apple event, I would also probably give this an A, maybe an A minus, just to be a little cynical, and also because I don't like the design of the MacBooks. But
for sure, for sure. Well, unfortunately, we have to move on. I have a hard stop
What do you
here in a
mean,
little bit.
unfortunately?
But anyway, well, yeah, Ryan's getting all revved up for this one. But the next thing we're going to talk about here is Google's event. So Google had an event earlier today where they released two phones, the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro, which is long awaited. We've been talking about it for a long time here, and I'm not sure what to think about it. I am really happy with the way that it their phones and all this stuff. But Ryan and I were talking a little bit earlier, and we said that Google's marketing team needs a little bit of work on this. They
They need to poach some Apple people.
honestly, but there was a lot of good that came out of this event, and they did unveil the Google Tensor, which is their new on phone processor, and it has
So see,
a ton of feature. Like I was super happy with the tensor, all of that stuff, and a couple things that just to note here: your Pixel 6 Pro is 6.7 inches of screen real estate. That is massive. Your Pixel 6 is 6.4 inches. Um, Here's the big thing: your cameras. on your
Mm.
Pro and your just Pixel 6, a 50 megapixel wide camera and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. But if you get the Pro, you then get a 48 megapixel telephoto lens on there.
4x, I believe.
Yes, with 4x, I believe optical zoom, I think.
Yeah,
Or
optical.
what?
Optical.
Yeah.
Up to, and that will. This is a. There's a big asterisk next to this, but up to 20 times zoom with computational photography.
And
There's
And
a
they
big
use the term.
asterisk. There's a big asterisk
we'll
next to
we'll
that, I
get to
think.
that
But
one. Other things, 8 gigabytes of RAM in the Pixel 6, 12 gigabytes in the Pixel 6 Pro, going up
yep,
to 512 gigabytes of onboard storage in the Pro, 256 in the regular one, and yeah, basically bigger battery, and everything else is relatively the same. But I want to talk about a couple things here. I want to talk about the camera, Tensor, and how Google is leveraging Tensor on device. Those were the
sure.
three biggest takeaways that I found
I
from this discussion.
think we might have missed one other difference, which is the screens. The normal Google
Oh yeah,
Pixel 6 is 90 hertz.
Oh, you're right. Yes.
The Pro is 120.
Yep.
up to 120, right?
Up to 120. But yeah, this was from a production quality of this event, it was definitely interesting. Instead of where Apple was like going to like different locations and stuff with all their like transition shots, they just like Google just took like a different angle of the same area, and it was just like, oh
Their
boy,
same New York-based Google store.
yep, oh boy,
Yep.
here's the store again. But anyway,
Yeah, there. That felt very low energy, and I watched a recap, and that was supposed to be quick cut and summarizing everything. And that felt painful to watch at times.
for
Sure.
sure.
I don't think they're looking at this as going to be the majority of their marketing. I wouldn't have. They probably should have done more and strove for a better press conference, but
Well, anyway, I don't care about the production. I care about the phones here. What
sure. So let's
is
talk about the phone.
Let's talk about the phones. Where do we want to start? Camera, Tensor, or leveraging Tensor on the phone? So,
I think we got to start at the heart, which is Tensor, because Tensor plays a role in the camera, it plays a role in everything else.
alrighty, sure
Mm-hmm.
thing. So, the obviously Tensor got introduced in this release today, and it's a 5 nanometer, 8 core design broken into big, medium, and small cores. Basically, two ARM Cortex X1s running at
Which is
2.8 gigahertz. Set little bit more powerful than the Snapdragon Triple
so
Eight.
yeah,
Um, then two A76 cores running at 2.25, and then four 1.8 gigahertz A55 cores as kind of their lower end stuff.
sure. To simplify that, I believe it's 2 low power, 2 mid power, 4 high power, right?
Reverse. Two high power, two mid power,
2
four
high
low power.
power, 2 mid, 4 low. Gotcha.
And that's actually on purpose too, because one of the things that they stressed in their design here was, yes, this chip isn't going to score the best on all of the benchmarks and everything like that, but why do we need to give it more horsepower than it's actually going to use? If we're going to be utilizing those four low power cores most of the time, what's the point of giving it more juice than it needs? It
Yeah.
only needs the juice for certain things, like onboard machine learning. Um, and that was one of the biggest things that came out of this as well. It has um, onboard machine learning models that do all sorts of cool stuff, and onboard security cores, which I found really interesting too.
Yeah, so a
So,
couple things on that. It seems what's interesting about them going to their own silicon is they really went as far as they could away from generic.
yes.
They built out a lot of their own specialty things. I think they said they have like a mini specialty core for deciding which cores even get turned on and used for something. I believe the word they used to refer to it was heterogeneous processing.
Yes, you're right.
Was what they used in the conference. So basically, it's supposed to be really good at picking which cores need to be active for which tasks and processes. A lot of what really caught me, and it's because Chip design was a big thing that I had wanted to do initially when I was starting school. Was they really focused in on something that's called a machine learning instance. It's basically where you take a machine learning model and you try to create a hardware based off it to just really speed it up, make it more efficient and faster. And it sounded like they included a couple of those in a couple different spots for this phone. Namely, I think they said something about that in the computational section, or computational photography section rather.
Yep.
But like, I thought that was really cool. It sounded like they have that in a couple places on the phone. And yeah, they have two types of security chips actually.
Right. And
They have a
Right.
sandbox
The
chip, I
Titan.
believe, and they have the actual Titan.
right.
Titan number 2.
And I want to talk about that sandbox really quickly because I find that incredibly interesting. So basically, you mentioned that heterogeneous computing. What that does is that says, hey, this is a secure process. We're going to throw this on its own core. We're going to sandbox this so you are completely mitigated from a lot of common threats that are between I guess the easiest way of explaining this is having malicious programs access things they shouldn't, and getting into areas of the computer or the processor that they shouldn't see. So what Tensor does to mitigate this risk is they say, okay, you're a security intensive application. We're going to throw this on its own core. We're going to only let you access this specific stuff. And if you do anything else, we are immediately going to flag it. So, and that was another thing too with their Titan M2 chip, to protect against like the malware and stuff that comes with it too. They added a lot of stuff in the software to even be like, here's your security, here's all the privacy things
Yeah.
like that. And I will say, Google's been trying to get away from like evil data harvesting megacorp stereotype for a while, and
We'll get to that.
we'll get to that, but I feel like I genuinely feel like they're trying with the Pixel 6. They're trying.
They might be.
So
Might.
okay.
I'm not
We'll get into
convinced.
that.
More on that just Titan M2 though. What really kind of struck me as well was this weird dedication to like thwarting straight up like physical attempts
Ooh, good
at
point.
like breaking into your phone. So like part of that is a really weird and niche thing called like laser code injection or laser something injection. I forget what the word is in the middle. It might be code, it might be something else, but it's a really high tech way of like basically causing an error in your phone that lets them get access to something they're not supposed to have access to. Laser injection. What is that?
It's let me
One of those. It's supposed to
laser
be
fault
resistant to like some
injection.
laser fault
Mhm.
injection. It's supposed to be resistant to magnetic. I think the same thing actually, magnetic fault injection too. There was a lot of like that kind of like, I guess what I would call higher profile security, like for if you were an important person or something and someone was trying to steal your data.
Right, like
Most of us are protected just by being inconspicuous
right. Like people
from that
physically
kind of thing
targeting you.
anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, like because I don't think it's worth someone's time to try and laser fault inject my phone.
Right.
Someone else who's actually like, sitting on, I don't know, $1 billion, that might be worth someone's time. But still, really cool features to have. Supposedly it's been verified by an outside lab. I'm pretty naturally skeptical whenever something like that gets claimed. I actually also want to level a criticism towards them too, because their charts and graphs were also very vague and
They
very
were
hard to
worse
draw a
than
lot of
Apple's.
solid. Yeah,
Hmm.
I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's still to me like I can't draw a conclusion from this. I want to see data. I want to see data. I'm sorry. It might not be convenient and it might not make you look the best, but I do want to know.
And I feel like there's a little bit of trust with that too, just being like, hey, here's what actually happened. We're not going to show you
Yeah,
the artificially inflated marketing graphs. We're going to show you, hey, this is actually what happened. Like, we're not
yeah,
going to show you a blob that's this big in the graph instead of like, okay, here's the point, here's the data, here's where we are, like stuff like that. So
Yeah, it was weird stuff. I think one of their claims actually was that it was 370% faster than a Snapdragon.
yeah,
I want to say 855. I'm not
that sounds
sure. It's
right.
whatever was on the 5A.
The 5A is 765.
It's the 765. So their
Okay.
claim is that it's 370% faster than that, which a part of me can believe just because I could see them wanting to have more GPU for their machine learning models. But at the same time, such a vague claim.
Right.
I have no context to put that in.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other things that I want to bring up too, we'll save the cameras for a little bit later, but
Yeah.
I want to bring up with the machine learning that's built into Tensor and how they're incorporating that into Android 12.
Hmm.
Some of the things that they went to show were the live voice translation, so literally talking into your phone, it translating it on the phone and transcribing it on the phone and then saying it to whoever. Traditionally, in today's world, you have to query their server, you have to have an internet connection, talk to them, and then get the data back. What this is doing is this is actually creating a model specifically on the phone that you don't have to connect to any other external
Hmm.
service for. In addition to that, just the voice recognition in general is vastly improved and on the device. So you don't have
Yes.
to send your voice data over to whoever else to transcribe it for you and get the data back. It is just built into the thing. With that, it actually also has punctuation detection, which I
Yep.
found really interesting, and emoji voice typing, which is okay, because I totally say emojis when I talk. Um, but yeah, that was two big things. Another
And
thing,
also, oh,
are you going to talk about it?
are you moving on or is it more related to what you were just saying?
More related to what I'm saying
Go
really
for it.
quickly.
Go for it.
Um, the other thing that I found interesting is they expanded on the Google duplex type thing. I guess I don't think it was like exactly what they said where they'd like call businesses and stuff like that, but um, they now know when phone lines for businesses are busy, and they will get you through robo menus and stuff like that using this translation, or excuse
Yep.
me, this transcription engine, to show you basically a GUI, a GUI of the phone menu for this thing, and you just hit it, and then it's gonna interact with the robo menu for you on your behalf and wait in line for you and all that stuff, which is kind of cool. I think that's an awesome feature, and I'd love to see that come to other phones too.
Yeah.
So
I was going at their voice typing is improved as well.
yes,
Apparently, and I think this might be like kind of an industry standard, which is crazy. Or maybe not crazy, but like a
oh
fix
yes,
that kind of seems intuitive is that it seems like a lot of places for voice typing, we've been using spelling. We've been basing it all off spelling. And it seems like they're trying to switch everything over to phonetics now. So that instead of listening for like specific sounds, or not even specific sounds, but like for spellings almost of things, it's listening for sounds.
Hmm.
Because like if you try to say the word, and I'm sure they in the past have needed a special exception for this, the word pterodactyl. That's not spelt at all like it sounds. That's a word that if you're trying to like guess what it is, you're gonna have better luck matching the phonetics than the spelling.
right. And it's interesting you mentioned this too, because it's one of those things where yes, you say a word like your, and it's going to suggest three different versions of your, but
Mm.
it actually needs to contextually know how that word is being used in the sentence to fill the correct word. Um, However, one of the examples that they put in in the demo was Catherine, spelled with a C or a K, or a YN or whatever, um, and kind of how you can pick the correct spelling and the correct autocorrect for that word instead of whatever's close to C if you spell it wrong or something like that. So really interesting, and I'm surprised that isn't industry standard. But
I think it's one of those things that everyone heard about voice typing and thought this was cool, and they implemented it. And that I think it's just been an overlook, just in general, because just if you ask me to come with a first solution, it's probably going to be spelling.
yeah,
Yeah.
it gets the
But
market
as soon
quick.
as you hear someone say like, "Oh yeah, we should switch just the phonetics," it's a fix that you hear and go, "Oh, duh, of course we should do that."
Yeah.
Right. Well, that was a lot. But in my opinion, the best and the biggest use for their AI on Tensor is their photography, their computational photography.
Furthermore,
They said
Furthermore,
it made me so happy. You have no clue. I was just like, I was like looking, I'm like, oh my God, we've been saying this. They said it.
right. So, Ryan, I'm going to let you take over this one because I know you have a
sure.
lot to say on this.
I'm gonna keep using the word that I made up, computational cinematography,
Because
which
of
I think is
why?
the next big step because of why.
Because of why?
So, like we were talking about, I think 2, 3 podcasts ago, they've stepped it up to the next level. They have their own custom chip. They have the platform they feel is sufficient to try and take a video and in real time enhance it using computational photography. Because, and this is something they even said during the thing because it's just correct. The Google Pixel has had some of the best, if not the best, like computational photography out of any phone, period. Just flat out. And it's using the same sensor for 5 generations of the phone. And it still takes some of the best pictures compared to any other phone. And now they're stepping up the hardware too. But the point of this Tensor, and when the press conference finished and I was looking at it, there's not this feature that makes me like that I can just recommend someone in one line to like, this is why you should buy the phone, but this is the closest thing to it. It's that it will in real time like change the way your video looks, make it look better, smoother, cleaner. All the fixes that it usually applies to the pictures, it's trying to apply as much of those as possible to the video now. And they only showed like I think a brief snippet, but man, it looked unbelievable. And that's going to be an absolute best case scenario, admittedly, but I came away very hopeful.
I didn't get that in the recap. Is there a way to get that on here?
Let me see if I can
Maybe.
find it. I could
It
probably
was like
pull
a
up the archive.
Because I'd
you're
be
thinking of
really
that lake
curious
video,
about
right?
Yes.
seeing that.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking of.
Mhm.
See, when I was thinking of the computational photography and cinematography, and I might be putting the
Oh,
carriage for
there's
the
still a
horse
long
here.
list. Don't worry.
Okay, I won't get into it yet because
No, go
I
for it.
think. Oh, okay. Well, I guess while we're waiting.
Yeah, while we're pulling this up, have at it.
Yeah, no, my biggest and this is I suppose more of a software feature than it is doing on demand
Sure. But it makes
you
use
know
of all those features.
stuff. It's that it's the magic erase tool, and not
Yeah.
only can you do that with new pictures, you can do that with old pictures. I think that is one of the coolest things. Now I'm not sure how well that actually will translate, whether or not they were really using very specific pictures to make sure that any sort of odd or slight imperfections didn't show up in a demo. Needless to say, even if it's a version 1 that's, let's say, 60% of the way there, this is great. From what
Impressive.
what I've seen in the demos, in the video, I was impressed.
And that, like, the thing that I wanted to bring up too with some of their just enhancements and stuff like that, they have like face unblur, where basically
Yep.
it recognizes a face in a picture. It will take a high res picture of the actual image and then a low res picture of the face and then match them up, basically use AI to unblur the picture. Some of the other stuff was motion tracking, so it would show motion. Um, and here we go. I think I found it. But a bunch of other stuff to that just make pictures look phenomenal. And I will say I am like I was blown away when I saw this camera stuff.
Yeah.
So here's the video that we were talking about. So they're saying like low light. Um, Here, it should be right. Here it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what they do is
That
they take this and apply all of the effects on the video and do that for the entirety of the video. So
4K 60.
yes, at 4K 60 frames per second, which is absolutely insane. I think they show it again, yeah. Um so this is yeah, like it's it is insane, and they show all of the different effects and filters and things that they do on the image in real time, and they talk about their HDR net, and like look at this, like oh my gosh. Just kind of
That's the before.
yes,
Yeah.
like you're
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll say this, and this is maybe more of an opinion. I think the Google pictures look great. I think comparatively though, they can look a little bit like too bright. And I think that is one of those examples where you have the water and the trees, and the trees kind of get some odd fade on them when with the effects applied. Needless to say, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's
yeah.
pretty amazing what they're able to do. Not to mention that they're doing this with this new hardware, 4K 60.
Another little, I think it's getting a little glossed over. Another thing that the Pixels were pretty well known for was their night sight. Their dark light photography was incredible. They've updated the sensor quite a bit. This was kind of a fad's the wrong word, but kind of a shift in trend. I think back in like 2012-ish, I want to say, where a lot of companies started saying, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. We can increase the size of our pixels instead of shoving more megapixels in here. And that lets us take in more light and maybe produce better photos that way. And
Right.
that's seems to be one of the steps they're taking with this is a wider aperture, bigger pixels, so they can take in more light, which hopefully should make that night sight absolutely like
They mentioned that too.
incredible.
Like they're like this is going
They
to be
do.
nuts, but um the other thing I want to talk about really quickly too is Magic Eraser. That was a really big thing
Yeah.
that I saw where it leverages the AI on the chip to actually remove things from the picture. So like she
Yeah,
clicks erase and then she just like erases the person in the picture. Like
Yeah. And then
basically
she does that
does
with a
it's
cone, a
pretty cool.
car, and a bunch of other stuff.
yeah, does Photoshop
Yeah,
like
it,
Photoshop straight on the picture, which is insane in my opinion.
yeah. I mean, I said what my piece earlier when we were loading up that video, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's pretty impressive. Not to mention you can do that on older pictures as well.
Right. But in all though, I thought that the camera on it here was insane.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about was the telephoto lens
Mm.
and the fact that they now
4x,
put
20x computational.
yes, they now put a prism in the actual phone here. That's why that back bar on the Pixel sticks out so high. They actually put a full out prism on the in the phone. For me at
Yeah.
least, I get a little concerned about drops or shakes or any form of G-force damage to the phone. Um, but it's worked in the
Sure.
past for other manufacturers. Hopefully, it works here.
Yeah. And
It
I
does
mean,
surprise me. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
I was just gonna say, like, every phone these days has a bump sticking out. I
Right.
know everyone takes very special care to really have the best plastic nap on the back. They're using whatever Corning's latest and greatest is.
Victus.
Gorilla Glass Victus, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of leads though to a point I wanted to make. They're not using the same glass, I believe, as for both the Pro and the standard 6.
I
Which
believe they
begs the
are.
Are you sure?
Give me a minute. Yes. Or excuse me, the back glass on the 6 is different. You're correct. I
Interesting.
didn't even
Yes.
notice that.
Good
Yeah.
pickup.
To me, that is kind of an odd decision to make the same design change for both the standard, if you want to call it an entry model, and the pro model, but give a different level of protection to the pro, even given this essentially the same design
Hmm.
and the same issues you're going to face.
Interesting.
Where do you even see this?
It's on their the Google store. They have a comparison chart. But
I just had a good memory from my recap, my
there
11-minute recap.
there you go. Yes, sir. But
Well, because that stuck out to me. Like it just didn't make much sense. That I mean, I suppose that I understand you want to reserve the more expensive, better features or just pro features for your pro model. Although I'm not sure if this is a pro feature or that it necessarily should be kept for the pro, considering the design decisions that they made.
right. And I don't know. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where you do see kind of a difference between that Pro and the 6. The one thing that I found this interesting too, and after this, Google must have coordinated with a bunch of YouTubers to have them drop like unboxing videos as soon as the event was over
Oh
because
yeah.
there were like a bunch of them that got posted, and Marquise Brownlee had a really good video on this, and he said the hardest thing that he sees between these two phones is the difference in $300 between the
Yeah.
6 and the 6 Pro. That's the thing. He's like, I can see a difference. I don't see $300 worth of difference, which
Hmm.
Sure.
I find
And
interesting.
let's see. That's basically it's better screen, right? I don't know where you're looking at to see this difference in glass. I don't see a difference.
It's all the way at the bottom.
Where at the bottom?
Yeah,
And you
scroll.
get the difference in the glass, you get the camera, you get the display
So
difference,
screen,
and then just the bigger
camera,
display.
4 gigs of RAM.
Yes. Yeah, it's here. There's the difference in the screen here. A little
Oh,
bit of a bigger
interesting.
battery.
And a
Um,
bigger battery, yeah.
a little bit of a bigger battery. You
I
have the
see.
telephoto.
So they're still
Telephoto.
using Gorilla Glass, but it's 6 versus the Victus.
Yeah, the
It could
different
be that they
screen.
wanted to protect that telephoto better.
I could see
Regardless, it
it.
does seem like a strange omission.
Yeah. And
I'm not a
it
fan
does
of that
seem
omission
interesting.
either.
And I bring it up only because if we're talking about the main line phone and a pro, I mean Apple has their own approach to this, and they flat out just have two different camera bumps.
Yeah.
In a very simple case, they could very easily eliminate the square bump on the 13 and just simply go with like an oval to eliminate that need for the bump. To me, if Google is not going to include that nice glass to protect the back like they do for the Pro, then change the camera bump, physically make it look different to
Yeah.
differentiate it between that and the Pro, which would also lend itself to that price. So you get a different design, and make the price and the design fit the function.
Right. That's a really good point. And I feel like with Apple devices, at least because of that difference in design, you kind of get almost a little bit of prestige when you see something like that.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, "Oh, he's got the Pro," because you could see the difference
Yeah.
there. With these Google devices, yes, there's a difference, but in my opinion, the major difference is you just see this forehead up here, a little bit of a difference with the Pro and the bigger screen. But
The size, I think, is probably pretty substantial, but yeah.
right,
It's 6.4 versus 6.7, correct?
correct. But
On the
it's
diagonal.
yeah, obviously. Um,
Yeah, but that diagonal, that
that's
0.3 is bigger on the diagonal.
yes.
Or it
Um,
feels that way anyway.
but yeah, that's kind of where I
Yeah.
see it.
The only last I wanted to bring up like 2 other things real quick. One of them
Sure.
was just a random tidbit. It looks like This is because how Snapchat works is they optimize for certain cameras. And really what that means is they optimize for the iPhone camera and they let everything else hang out to dry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like a step Google's taking with this phone is they're just giving Snapchat the ability to just use Google's stuff inside the phone.
Yep.
Which is for the first time actually, and you can do side-by-side comparisons people have of Snapchat's taken on an iPhone and an Android phone. And the iPhone one always looks better because it's the only one they bother to optimize for because the Android market's too diverse.
Mhm.
So this will be the first case, hopefully, where it's like these will look really good on it.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And the
That's a
last
good
thing was
point.
just I wanted to dovetail into kind of what we were talking about earlier, the design, what everyone thinks of it. I like it. I think it's different enough from everything else I've seen this year to actually give it a distinct look.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right? I
definitely.
think they made a good decision. It doesn't look like a clone of something outright. The only phone I can off the top of my head think of to compare it to is like a Nexus 6P, which is Google's own phone anyway, so it doesn't really warranting a comparison, that's not a bad thing.
Right.
Well, then did they just recycle an old design?
No. That was rounded back. That's the only thing I can think of to make a comparison to, though.
So
Instead of having that back bar, it was like this weird rounded thing. It wasn't the best looking phone, to be honest.
so my opinion on this is I like the design with the right case. That's the thing. I feel like
I
straight
don't like all the colors.
yes. I don't like
Hmm.
all the colors. In my opinion, a black phone is all you need. But I do see with a case that would complement the photo bar here, kind of make the phone a little thicker. Maybe if you even feel ambitious, maybe put a battery or something in there. Who knows? But make it a little thicker, bring everything nice and level. Maybe recess this in a little bit. I think that would be a gorgeous phone. As it stands right
Yeah,
now, um, I'm not a huge fan of a phone that wouldn't lay flat on a table.
there's no phone. Honestly, from what I can see, actually, this lays better on a table than a lot of phones.
Screen down,
It's
huh?
more
Because
Oh,
symmetrical, yeah.
yeah, good point.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
it's
because
just
it's symmetrical across the
yeah,
whole back.
it would just
Everything with a
lay
camera
up a little
bump
bit. Yeah,
doesn't really lay perfectly flat.
good point. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's. But other than that, I
I'm
see with a case, I think it would be fine.
Yeah. I think it's missing what kind of became a staple on the last few Pixels, which is just a different colored power button, which
That's
seems
what they.
weird to miss, but I really liked that. It was kind of cool.
That's what people were saying. Like a lot of the
Yeah.
unboxings mentioned that. Where is the different colored power button? But
Hmm.
And we did miss one other design difference, I think, and I believe the Pro has stainless steel sides, while the normal has aluminum.
That's standard with what Apple does.
Yeah.
hmm
I mean, it's one for one what they do with their mainline phones versus their Pros. And they've been doing that since the 10. So
Yeah.
4 years, 3 years.
right.
It makes sense. I mean, again,
It
you
does
have to
make sense.
differentiate.
It's a
So
more
yeah,
premium metal.
I suppose in that maybe fine. I still think they could have done something with the camera bump, especially if you're not including that extra periscope sensor setup. I don't
I
really
mean,
love.
sure.
I'm not over the moon with this new design as Ryan is. I'm just not.
I
So
like
I mean,
distinctness.
simply put, this is the exact same configuration as about every phone out there. Just in a different configuration. It's a protruding camera bump with 2 to 3 camera sensors with glass and now a stainless steel band or aluminum.
That's
That's
okay. Not glass back,
it's
aluminum
just
back.
about it's just about like every other camera,
No.
every phone.
Here's the thing, though. What do you want anyone to do with 3 cameras? Do you want them to spread it across the phone? You're
The
going
only
to group
difference
them together.
the only difference they made was the orientation of the cameras, which
Sure.
lends itself to the bump. That's it.
No. if you look at, here's my point. If you look at this phone, you're not going to mistake it for any other phone. You're not going to be confused what it is. It's its own
Okay.
look. There's not something that looks like it.
It's still very derivative. It's very derivative.
That is the most
Not to mention
paltry
that
of
it actually
criticisms to
does share a
anything.
lot of design similarities with the Nexus 6P after looking at it. The only thing it doesn't share is the forehead
Sure.
bump and the rounded corners. Otherwise, it's about very similar.
Calling something derivative is the most paltry of criticisms. Yeah, it looks like something that's existed already. Guess what? Everything ever looks like something that's existed already.
Well, I'm using
I wouldn't mistake this for any
I'm
other
using the word
phone.
derivative though because you're making the argument that it's so unique, it's so different. It's not.
No, I'm saying it's distinctive from any other phone that's out right now.
Let
If I
me
look
let
at
me
that,
make my
I'm not
point a
going to
little more
mistake
clear.
that design language and that footprint for any other phone.
Let me be a little more clear. And maybe this is not the greatest comparison, but I'll make it. The step from slide phones to slabs of glass, even with touchscreens on both, that's a major improvement. That's a big step. That's a big change. The camera bumps, that's a whole new aspect to it. If you
True.
want to change that formula, fine. It's still the same formula. It's like trying to bake a cake, but putting the ingredients in slightly different orders. You're gonna get the same cake, or you might get a similar looking cake, but it's gonna be fundamentally similar, or at least very much identical.
A better comparison, I think, would be calling like a cinnamon cake versus vanilla cake. My point is simply that it doesn't look like a clone of something else. I can look at it. I know that this phone has this design language. It's this phone. There's not going to be 5 other phones that I'm going to mistake this with. And maybe this is something that you're less familiar with just because of like Apple. A lot of Android phones can fall into like kind of a rut where everyone kind of shares and copies designs around. I just like that it's got its language, it exists, and I'm not going to mistake it for something else.
Alrighty. I can see that, definitely. Well, before we end today, I just want to get your guys' opinions on this device, on this release. A through F, we did it for Apple. Where would you guys rate this Pixel?
How are we grading this?
Let's grade overall design for use case.
I have 2 minds on this, right? The first is that I like a ton of the changes they've made. I see a lot of usefulness in their features. But then my other mind is I don't have like that one line sell you on this phone feature. I don't have that. There's a ton of really great small features other than maybe the camera.
You made the case earlier, though. I feel like, or not just. I feel like, didn't you say earlier that the computational cinematography is that big selling point?
I said that's the only thing that I could maybe use as a selling point. And I'm not an expert on what everyone else wants, quite frankly. Cameras aren't the single most important thing to me in a phone. It's something that I don't get the most use out of, to be honest, even though I love a lot of the stuff behind it. But like that's the closest thing to like a selling point I can use, is that it has this really good camera and this really good cinematography. As far as like the overall experience of the phone, to me, it looks like an A. As far as I will see how their marketing and marketability goes, maybe a B.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Winslow?
See, it's interesting to look at a lot of these other products that I don't own. I'm very entrenched in this Apple ecosystem, although I am very open-minded, and I try and listen to the other, companies, what they have to say. We cover not just Apple on this show. I think more than anything else, the biggest thing coming into this event was that Tensor chip. I didn't see a ton of information on it or specs. To me, and this is something that Fitz and I discussed in the pre-show, the difference between what Google's doing, what Apple's doing is Google Apple wants to create this really just incredibly powerful chip for their phones, just big, efficient, right? But they just really want to crank as much power as they can. It seems that Google is going a different route, and they're really working on efficiency. So much so that they're kind of not pigeonholing themselves, but really specializing in a few things that we mentioned. And I think the one that kind of goes in all of those mentioned things is the AI. Is that computational photography? It's that special software, that special juice. In that respect, I think that it was great, and it really showed off what, or at least they've attempted to show off what the Tensor can do, or at least the bare minimum, if not the ceiling. So in that respect, and given all of my feedback with the Pixel, I'll rate it just as the same as the Apple Vent. There's things that didn't really pique my interest or wow me, like the design in stark contrast to Ryan. But I think they had a lot of really cool things. A lot of that computational photography software things. Actually, I'm going to move it down to a B plus just because I really don't like the Android 12 on that phone. I think it looks disgusting. I don't like how it looks, and maybe that's just as an Apple fanboy and iOS user. I don't like the software. So I'm actually going to bump it down just for that, and the design of the phone. But I'm really looking forward to this phone and what it can do. And I'm really looking forward to how Google further implements their Tensor chip, potentially in some versions of tablets, some sort of X version of it, or a Pro or a Max version of it. We'll see where it goes. I'm more excited to see where the Tensor goes than how well the Pixel 6 does.
Good way of putting it. I'm going to give it a B because I believe that it's got a lot of good features, like the photography, like the transcription, all of that stuff, the Tensor chip. But the things that I think it lacks are, like you mentioned, some of the applications of the Tensor chip. The UI is disgusting, in my opinion, and
Everyone
it's
likes material design. Jeez.
I like material design when it's used properly. I don't like my clock looking like a 5-year-old drew it.
Yeah, it's so
But
abstract.
here you could kind of see it on this where it looks like, yeah, this looks like a freaking, and it
Yeah.
turns and
Looks
it's
like a
weird.
doily.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it looks like.
But
It's a
anyway,
doily. It's a
the
solid color doily.
right. And the other thing that I really did enjoy is the fact that there will be 5 years of updates for this phone, which is basically unheard of. But
It's a caveat to that.
security
It's
updates,
5 years of total updates, 3 years of actual system software updates.
right? Which I still think is a pretty okay life cycle. I mean,
3 years of feature updates.
yeah, 3 years of feature
Apple's
updates.
That's
got
about
6.
no. They have 6 years of maintenance and security.
They still roll out software updates. I'm still
Yeah,
getting. There are phones older than mine
but they
that
start
have
cutting
gotten the
off
newest
features.
OS.
Yeah, they cut off features though. With Android, it's a lot harder to cut off a feature than it would be. So in at least,
Either way,
so that's my ranking. But basically, I thought it was pretty decent event.
Yeah, I got two little things to add
Alrighty.
that we didn't quite, I think, get around to. I think I might have already forgotten the second. Uh, the one of the things we didn't get around to, and maybe we address this another time, maybe we don't, is they say they're going to be handling a lot of like the personalized ML learning stuff
Hmm.
on device and kind of dealing with it there, which that's what you should do. It probably shouldn't leave your device.
Right.
I don't know how much I trust that. It's Google. I don't know if we want to address that another time or whatever. I think I had one more thing, but I lost track of it, so that might be it.
No worries, no worries. But yeah, we're gonna have to end off here, unfortunately. But we had a great discussion on a lot of cool technology that is coming out into the market in the last couple of days, and I don't think we're over for this holiday season yet. I'm expecting a couple of
Oh.
other pretty big announcements coming from some other companies in the tech sphere here. So we will keep on top of that and more with more episodes of Tech Talk Nation. So I'd like to thank Mr. Matt Grislow and Mr. Ryan Eastman for being here again today. It is always a pleasure to do this broadcast, and we would love if you could follow us on social media and just follow along, be part of the Tech Talk Nation here, and we love interacting with everybody. So follow us on social media. We will be around hopefully next week to go on another show here, and thank you once again for joining us for this special edition of Tech Talk Nation. Have a wonderful night and see you back here next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Tech Talk Nation. Tune in next week for more discussion on the latest in tech.